He is the Director of Legislative Affairs and is often one of our go-to guys here. Bryce Mongeon joins us from OOIDA. It's Washington Trucking Week. Go to OOIDA.com. You can find them on the Book of Face at that acronym, as well as on the X, formerly known as Twitter, on the Tube of You at Truckers OOIDA and OOIDA underline Truckers on the gram of Insta. Hey, brother, how you doing? Welcome to the show as always. It's good to have you, and it's a hell of a story from Jamie, and it's a hell of a conversation to be having, is it not?
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. And it doesn't stop with these issues that we've been covering now for the past few months on non-domiciled, English language proficiency, and everything else that's going on. It's a real Pandora's box that seems to have been opened.
Yeah, and to kind of put this away, I don't think the administration expected this. I mean, they've gotten ahead of it and they're on top of it, but I think that they had other thoughts. They didn't realize that the real pipeline for a lot of the nonsense that's been kind of unfolding. I'll give you the lead. News had barely broken on the arrest of an alleged terrorist wanted by Uzbekistan. Almost immediately, lawmakers began demanding to know why he was issued a non-domiciled CDL. You want to unpack this, brother?
Yeah, I mean, it really just fits the profile of everything else, or really fits the profile and highlights the shortcomings that we've been talking about now for a long time, which is when you don't have the proper vetting systems in place, when you don't have a way to gather information on folks who are applying for these non-domiciled CDLs, you are inevitably going to have dangerous situations come up. So from really the beginning of this year and over the summer, we've been urging U.S. DOT and states to really pause this program, figure out what's going on, and at a minimum, implement reforms that will get the information necessary to figure out who's applying for these and what their safety background is. So in this case, as you said, it's relatively straightforward. Uzbekistan issued a warrant for this individual for being a member of a terrorist organization. Despite that, he was still able to apply for and receive a non-domiciled CDL. So clearly there is a breakdown in the information that should be part of the process for someone getting a CDL.
Yeah, and look, and I'm not withholding judgment, but I'm gonna say this: there may be more to the story, because I have to tell you, there are people in other countries who have been labeled members of terrorist organizations, and I have to tell you, there are times. I'll give you an example: if Vladimir Putin labels your human rights organization as a terrorist organization, you might wear it as a badge of honor. We don't know the full story, but we do know that another country labeled him a terrorist organization, and it doesn't seem that anybody did the diligence of even finding out that status was the case, and then digging deeper to find out what the purpose of that assignment was to him from Uzbekistan. And like I said, I'm not his defense attorney. What I'm saying is, it doesn't matter if it turns out that he was part of a freedom fighting group. It doesn't matter if he was standing up for oppressed Christians. It doesn't matter. What we know, the simple basic thing that we know, should have prevented him from ever having a CDL. Full stop, right?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. And I think that's a good way to frame it. Some sort of red flag should go up, regardless of who or what is accusing this. If you've got some sort of alleged ties to terrorism and jihad, that should be a red flag that warrants some further review. Whatever the merits may ultimately turn out to be, again, the fact that this just wasn't on the radar of apparently Pennsylvania when they issued this is a huge problem.
Yeah, and it's interesting to me, too, that, like I said, there are social media. Okay, by the way, I am not his defense attorney, because there are some social media posts that he made, too, that had anybody done any diligence would have been like, hey, maybe, as Bryce said, maybe we should go with the guy from West Virginia and not hang this one on the guy who's calling for jihad. Just an idea that's occurred to me, and that's it too. Like I said, the lack of diligence here, and that lack of diligence goes back to the fact that the law, as it was originally written, allows for this sort of either dereliction of duty, malfeasance, or mischief. Right? There's only three ways this can end: either people aren't paying attention, engage in genuine malfeasance, or in fact are in favor of it. And that's a real problem. I don't know if you heard the last interview we did. Jim and Joanne of OBAC, north of the border, they were talking about the fact that driving instructors are not required to meet any standards for driving experience or teaching credentials. When you couple that with the fact that in Canada you can literally start the process of becoming an over-the-road truck driver up there from the moment after you get your actually just regular driver's license. And you begin to see that trucking in some ways has become a giant loophole for a lot of people who are looking to short-circuit the system and get themselves into the country faster. Because one of the best ways to move yourself towards citizenship or to move yourself towards disappearing into the fabric of the country is to actually have a job. And we've opened these possibilities up. So talk about the efforts to close it down. I mean, talk about the efforts to shut this down, and both what I call both the reactive side of stopping the law as it is, but also what comes next.
Yeah. I mean, there's, I'm sure as most listeners know, there's a whole heck of a lot that's been going on this front, on the regulatory side, on the legislative side, and also on the state side. I'll start with what we said a few months ago, which was we sent a letter to U.S. DOT Secretary Duffy and said, pause this program immediately until you can figure out what are the safety ramifications of what's going on here. We need to get a handle on what's going on because we know states are not tracking this issue. So there's a need to put a pause to this right now. And we followed up with that to a letter to state governors that are in states that are issuing these non-domiciled CDLs, and encourage them to cease their programs as well, because it's important to note that states do not have to participate in this non-domiciled CDL program. They do not have to issue non-domiciled CDLs, and I think it's 7 or so did not issue them prior. Nevada recently announced that they're going to cease issuing non-domiciled CDLs. So we think that would be the quickest and most straightforward way to help cut down on some of this and really eliminate it, would be for states to take the action, because they have a lot more latitude than U.S. DOT does on this issue. And as I know folks are aware too, there's been legislation introduced in Congress. The bill that has the most support in Congress and is really married up with what the Trump administration has done is a bill from Congressman Rouser, the Non-Domiciled CDL Integrity Act. And that would basically codify what U.S. DOT and FMCSA issued back in September to crack down on non-domiciled CDLs, to ensure that there's mechanisms in place to get people's backgrounds, and more than anything else, drastically cut the number of non-domiciled CDLs that are out there by somewhere in the neighborhood of 98%. So we are continuing to push for this legislative solution. If Congress passes a law or passes a bill and the president signs it into law, makes it a whole heck of a lot easier than having to go through the rulemaking process, which will inevitably and already is subject to legal challenges and everything like that. So our big push now is to support this legislation that, again, works hand in hand with what the Trump administration has put forward. And it's also the bill right now that has the most support in Congress. They're adding co-sponsors every week on this. So we'll see where that heads, but we believe this is the best and most viable option to make real safety improvements on this issue.
And so when that happens, when that happens, how fast do you think we would begin to see change? I mean, is this still ongoing? I guess that's my real question. Is this still ongoing, despite the fact that everybody knows, everybody's looking, and the world is shifting fast under their feet? Do you guys feel like that there is still this practice of issuing the non-domiciled CDLs? I mean, do you feel like that's a reality?
Yeah. It's still, I think, a little early to see. I think there's some indications, though, that DOT's actions are already having a positive effect on safety. Like I said, Nevada has said that they're going to cease issuing non-domiciled CDLs. And as I said earlier, nothing requires states to issue non-domiciled CDLs. So even though there's, this legislative work on it, and even though there's the court challenges going on with FMCSA's rule, the renewed focus on this issue, I really think has put states on notice. Now this story in Pennsylvania with this gentleman from Uzbekistan, that I would really hope would give lawmakers, would give governors pause about continuing to issue these non-domiciled CDLs. So there is nothing stopping states from self-policing on this issue. And I do think that we will see some improvements on that front. On the other hand, you've got California out there who's seemingly fighting this tooth and nail, despite, seeming to really screw some things up too, and how they've been doing this and just flat out failing to, again, follow proper procedure and vet the people who are getting CDLs and non-domiciled CDLs. So I don't think you're going to see across the board improvement immediately, but I do think that this focus on the issue will move the needle in the right direction.
Let me ask you a question. This is I'm asking a genuine question, the one that I don't know the answer to. I'm not behaving like a lawyer here, Bryce, so you got to help me through this. Is it possible for states to say we don't recognize non-domiciled CDLs? I mean, like you said, they could opt out of it. Can states actually bring pressure by passing laws that say if you drive in here with a non-domiciled CDL, you're done? We're not doing it.
Yeah, that is outside of my area of expertise as well. Off the top of my head,
I don't know.
I think there are some states who have indicated that, and that gets into that's going to get into other issues as far as interstate commerce. If a state's saying they issued something that was in compliance with federal law, can a state basically say we don't recognize that? I don't know. Certainly, that would definitely get some court challenges, but I would not be surprised if we see some states move in that direction and we find out what the answer to that question might be. But I do not know.
Yeah, maybe it won't happen because there aren't any governors out there on the left or the right who are engaged in grandstanding these days. So it's not really a possibility. I'm being very sarcastic.
Yeah, again, I think, and as I've kind of noodled on this too, does that open? I don't know. Does that open a can of worms where you've got some governor that says, we see there's a lot of crashes from CDLs from this state. We're not going to recognize them because we've noticed an uptick. I don't know. We're just hypothesizing here, and I think that would open up its own can of worms.
Yeah.
But I do think there may be some interest in pursuing that. I think some states have already said something similar to that. So
yeah.
Definitely, I think a possibility that we'll see efforts to do that.
If we've learned anything over the last 10 years, the logical conclusion is not something that people really are interested in the immediate moment. All of this, by the way, everything is interconnected, everything everywhere all at once. And that, of course, brings us to the English language proficiency requirement bills that are making their way through Congress right now. Each one of them has different merits. And matter of fact, some bilingual truck drivers from OOIDA got themselves involved in the game. I think one of the best solutions of all time. But tell us where we are in regards to what ELP stuff you guys are getting behind, what's piqued your interest, and what you guys think are non-starters.
Yeah, there's a few bills that we are very much supportive of. I'll start with the one that was introduced earliest this year, which is from Congressman Dave Taylor from Ohio, and then later in the year, Senator Cynthia Lummis introduced the companion bill in the Senate. It's called Connor's Law, and would basically ensure that English language proficiency is part of the CDL process, and it would put English language proficiency as an out-of-service violation into law. So, as I said earlier, Congress passing a bill, the president signing it into law, short-circuits a lot of the frustrations and challenges that can come with the regulatory process. So this bill would put into law those changes that we, again, believe would improve safety and that we've been asking for a long time. There's other legislation, and there's a couple different bills here. Senator Marshall from Kansas introduced a bill, the Commercial Motor Vehicle English Proficiency Act, which is similar to Mr. Taylor's bill in that it would ensure that drivers are able to demonstrate English language proficiency before they get their CDL, and it would also prohibit tests from being administered in languages other than English. So both the knowledge and skill portions of the test would have to be conducted in English. There's also a bill from Senator Cotton from Arkansas and Representative Andy Barr from Kentucky that would do something similar, ensure that testing is done in English so that CDL applicants have English language proficiency. So there's a couple different bills that are floating out there right now, and I think where this is headed is to the highway vote process. It's unclear exactly what language will be in the final highway bill, but I think we can expect to see some combination of these bills that will ultimately ensure that English language proficiency is an out-of-service violation, will ensure that that testing is done in English, and will also ensure that there's English language proficiency before getting your CDL. And I think that last point is one of the most important because we've said from the start this is about safety. This isn't about trying to go get people off the roads on technical violations or trying to ruin people's livelihoods just to make a point. But if you're ensuring that people have English language proficiency before they get their CDL, you're avoiding all of these other problems down the line. You're avoiding putting someone out of service because they're not safe. So by addressing this on the front end, we think that these bills will help to really, again, improve safety and make sure that we're not getting back to the point where we are today.
The other thing is, too, is that, if you do it that early in the process, you're telling people you're not invited. And I hate to put it that way, but that's exactly it. It's like, hey, man, you want to be a part of this game? Even if you are here legally, it's basically telling people, hey, next step. It's time for the next step. You can't balkanize. You got to actually get in the game. And by the way, there are plenty of services around the country. I'm going to tell people this right now, having actually worked for one as a volunteer for the better part of 2 years, there's a lot of places and a lot of organizations that are teaching people conversational English. You don't have to be able to diagram sentences, but there are people out there who are teaching people to read and speak English. And if we make that part of the firewall, it makes it much more difficult for people to look at this as an end run into the American dream without doing the heavy lifting that often goes along with the people who really come here and play by the rules. It really does. And you make a great point, too. It prevents misunderstandings on the road. It takes a burden off of law enforcement because then it's like we can track it back, especially if, the work that the CVTA and the NAPF TDS and you guys are doing in the training sector, if we're able to track people back and be like, he couldn't speak English, he wasn't here legally, you had him in your classroom. You had a crack at the title, and you issued him a CDL, because all of the stuff that you guys are talking about isn't so much about these bad actors behind the wheel. It's following the money and following the issuance that you guys are really interested in stopping here, right?
Absolutely. And that kind of leads me to the next point. And as you said before, all these issues are connected. It's really impossible to untangle them all. But the root cause of so much of this is that carriers, unscrupulous carriers, and even more scrupulous carriers want the cheapest labor possible in the seat. And they are unfortunately willing to do whatever's necessary to get there, even if that means sacrificing safety of other people out on the road. But like you said, also sacrificing the safety of the people who they're putting behind the wheel. And when I talk to lawmakers, when we talk to lawmakers, we stress that point too. We're not only or necessarily even really criticizing these drivers who are involved in some of these tragic situations. They are being set up to fail. So if we're able to, like you said,
some of them are actual slaves, Bryce. I will go on record as saying some of these men and women that are driving these trucks who are in these situations have nothing but, for me, until an accident occurs, nothing but unending, deep compassion. They are trapped behind the wheel, knowing that if they speak out, they may end up back in some place that has terrible consequences for them. I'm just going to say that right now. It's American slavery. It is indentured servitude for some of these people. I'm sorry, I had to get that off my chest.
No, and those are the types of that gets back to those people are not set up to be safe. Absolutely, and that's why we're trying to again bring it back bigger picture. Secretary Duffy also talked about the need to crack down on these CDL mills and these people, these schools that are just getting people through as quickly as possible, whether or not they're even training them well or ensuring that they're even qualified. So that is also part of our effort here is ensuring that all drivers are trained, ensuring that we have a handle on who's doing things the right way, and being able to identify who's skirting the rules and regulations too, in order to help crack down on that as well. So there's no silver bullet on these issues. It gets so complicated. I feel crazy sometimes when you go into these congressional offices and you start talking, and it's like it's hard to talk about one thing without starting to talk about another. It's really true how interconnected all these issues are.
Well, and there's all kinds of ways around this in regards to really positive energy. I think in regards to kind of getting a grasp on it is figuring out sequences. And by the way, sequences are often, have cracks in them that allow, things to jump in line. But if we could figure out some way of how people get recruited, how they get onboarded, how they get trained, what responsibilities the people who hire them have to complete their training. We haven't even begun that conversation. But if we can, in fact, figure out a rigorous yet fair sequence that actually allows somebody to cross a state line in a truck, that's really the big thing, that all of those interconnected pieces are really about process being proper. Think about all the violations of the sequence as it should have happened that lead us to the tragic events in Florida, right? Somebody lifted the fence. Somebody issued him a CDL. Somebody let him pass through way stations. Somebody let him drive from all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast, and nobody stopped him until 3 people were dead. People kept lifting up fences and changing the rules to accommodate this human being. And that's it. It's kind of explaining to people that the supply chain is also a series of human beings making choices as who is actually driving inside that supply chain. I mean, I think the only way to get a grasp on it is to remember that it is a journey to get somebody behind the wheel and do it properly. And that's what you guys are trying to figure out right now, what the best, most efficient, and yet most rigorous way to do that is, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and absolutely. And getting back to something we've been advocating for as part of that is just a bare minimum number of behind the wheel training hours. And that was something that Senator Cotton actually raised in a letter he sent to Secretary Duffy on talking about CDL mills. He also flagged maybe the USDOT should be looking at a minimum number of hours behind the wheel. That was part of a conversation we had with the senator's office when they introduced their legislation. Again, we reiterated what we've been talking about here is that, yes, these steps will improve safety that we're talking about on English language proficiency on non-domiciled CDLs. But if you really want to get to the root of the problem and make everybody safer, you've got to start at the beginning, which is the training process. So put a bare minimum of 30 hours behind the wheel. That's what nearly everybody who participated in the original entry-level driver training committee said. It's less than a full work week. I love the line that our Vice President, Louis Pugh, uses. In Missouri, you need I can't remember if it's a couple hundred or 1,000 hours to cut hair, and you don't need any to drive a truck. And he's never seen anybody die from a bad haircut. So what are we even doing if we're not willing to require that bare minimum time behind the wheel before someone can get their CDL?
By the way, you should check out how much time you have to spend in training as a massage therapist before you're actually able to make a living off of it. It's staggering. It is staggering.
Yep.
And it just, and I got to tell you, it hurts my heart. It hurts my heart that state legislatures are willing to pass those kind of things and yet aren't willing to pass this kind of stuff, because there is, well, here's the thing. There isn't big massage. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's the thing. There isn't big haircut. I mean, let's face it. I mean, Supercuts, is not like, dominating the market and pushing against that so we can get, because they actually, here's the other thing too. People see the results of what they paid for in a lot more immediate ways. And that's the difference too. A lot of people just want to pretend they don't see what's going on. And the problem is these accidents mount and these disasters like, terrorist watch lists from Uzbekistan show up. It becomes harder and harder to ignore. Okay, so as we head towards Thanksgiving, what else are you guys looking for this week over on the Hill? Anything you got your eye on coming up?
We're going to keep watching, see if there's any new development, any more English language proficiency bills that come up here before the Thanksgiving holiday. It seems like there's more than any other issue I've worked on since coming on at OOIDA, just a constant flow of bills addressing this topic. So we've always got our ears to the ground on that issue. And other than that, kind of the other, update is we're looking a little further out for highway bill reauthorization. Chairman Graves of the House T&I committee had set an ambitious schedule of having a bill released around this time and starting to consider it in committee. But with the government shutdown, he's pushed that timeline out. So I think it will be, at least outside of these English language proficiency, these non-domiciled CDL issues, a little more quiet on Capitol Hill for our issues through the end of the year.
Bryce Mongeon joins us, as he's often wont to do, on Washington Trucking Week. You guys know him, of course, at OOIDA as the Director of Legislative Affairs. It's always a pleasure to have him. What are your Thanksgiving plans, by the way, Bryce?
Oh, heading up to going to see my parents, spending time with family. So it'll be a nice time to relax a little bit. recharge, get some quiet time.
As I'm about to say in the next half hour when Lindsay joins us, guys, start thinking about what's going to make the perfect Thanksgiving dinner happen for you next week. Don't turn Thanksgiving morning into a meditative state to brace yourself for Uncle Lou, who's emotionally too. Bryce Mongeon has joined us, both emotionally and intellectually, a man beyond his years. Thank you so much, my friend. Happiest of holidays to you, and we will talk at you soon.